April 26, 1986, a day etched in history as the worst nuclear disaster mankind has ever seen, the Chernobyl nuclear disaster. It was a day of unseen disaster, a catastrophe that resonates even today, decades later. Nestled in the heart of the Soviet Union, near the city of Pripyat, the Chernobyl nuclear power plant was a symbol of the atomic age, a beacon of scientific progress. It was here that nuclear energy was harnessed, promising a future where power would be plentiful and cheap. But this promise came with a price. On that fateful day in April, the world was reminded of the potential dangers of nuclear power. A routine safety test went horribly wrong, leading to an explosion in one of the reactors. The fallout from this disaster was far-reaching, spreading radioactive material across the European continent. In the blink of an eye, the Chernobyl disaster became a global concern. Countries thousands of miles away detected elevated levels of radiation. International headlines were dominated by the incident, sparking widespread fear and uncertainty. This was not just a Soviet problem, it was a disaster that affected the world. The Chernobyl disaster was a stark reminder of the destructive power of nuclear energy when it's not properly managed. It exposed the risks associated with nuclear power plants, particularly those operating under lax safety standards. This event triggered a worldwide rethink of nuclear energy policies, leading to stricter regulations and safety measures. But the Chernobyl disaster wasn't just about policy changes, it was a human tragedy affecting hundreds of thousands of people. From the plant workers and first responders who risked their lives to prevent further catastrophe, to the residents of nearby towns who had their lives upended, the human cost was significant. The echoes of Chernobyl continue to reverberate today. The site remains a stark reminder of the disaster, with an exclusion zone in place to protect people from the lingering radiation. It's a place of ghost towns and abandoned buildings, a testament to the devastation caused by the disaster. So what led to this catastrophe? Let's venture into the heart of the disaster. The Chernobyl nuclear power plant, a symbol of Soviet technological prowess, held a more sinister destiny. Nestled in the heart of Ukraine, near the town of Pripyat, the Chernobyl nuclear power plant was an emblem of the Soviet Union's stride towards nuclear energy. Constructed in the 1970s, its 4 reactors stood as pillars of progress, a testament to mankind's quest for harnessing the atom's power. The plant was designed to generate electricity for a vast region, supplying power to countless homes, factories, and cities. It was a beacon of the nuclear age, demonstrating the potential of nuclear energy to revolutionize society's power needs. It was a symbol of a brighter future, where the energy of the atom would light up cities and power progress. Each of the plant's 4 reactors had the capacity to produce 1,000 megawatts of electricity. That's enough to power a city the size of Boston. Together, they generated an impressive 4,000 megawatts, making Chernobyl one of the largest nuclear power plants in the world at the time. But the plant was more than just a generator of electricity. It was part of a grand vision, a symbol of the Soviet Union's technological prowess and ambition. It represented the promise of a future where energy was plentiful and clean, a world powered by the atom. Yet, beneath the surface, there were ominous signs. The type of reactor used at Chernobyl, known as an RBMK reactor, was notoriously unstable at low power levels. And its design lacked certain safety features commonly found in other reactors. These flaws would prove catastrophic. The purpose of the Chernobyl nuclear power plant was to harness the power of the atom for the benefit of society. But, as we now know, this grand vision was marred by a fatal flaw. It was a ticking time bomb, a disaster waiting to happen. But the power plant was to become synonymous with disaster. A series of unfortunate decisions and safety violations paved the way to the disaster. This chain of events started with the power plant's ideology that safety was secondary to production. This mindset was a ticking time bomb waiting to explode. The Chernobyl nuclear power plant was designed with a type of reactor known as an RBMK reactor, which had inherent design flaws. However, these flaws were overlooked in the pursuit of cheap and efficient nuclear power. The reactor's design made it unstable at low power levels, a fact that was tragically ignored during the ill-fated experiment that took place on that fateful night. On the 25th of April, 1986, a routine test was scheduled to determine how long the turbines would spin and supply power to the main circulating pumps, following a loss of main electrical power supply. This test was to be conducted during a planned decrease in reactor power in preparation for a routine shutdown. However, due to a sudden demand for power in the Kiev region, the power reduction was postponed, leading to a late-night shift of unprepared workers carrying out a complex nuclear test. As the clock ticked towards the early hours of the 26th of April, the plant was in the hands of men who were not fully prepared for the task at hand, setting the stage for disaster. The test began, and due to a series of miscalculations and misunderstandings, the reactor's power plummeted far lower than safe levels. Attempts to increase the power led to an uncontrollable power surge. Emergency shutdown systems failed, and a chain reaction was set in motion. A sudden and unexpected power surge resulted in a steam explosion, which ruptured the reactor vessel and led to a series of further explosions. These blasts exposed the graphite moderator components of the reactor to air, causing them to ignite. And then, the unthinkable happened. The roof of the Chernobyl power plant blew off, releasing a cloud of deadly radioactive particles into the atmosphere. The worst nuclear disaster in history had just begun. In the blink of an eye, life as they knew it changed forever. The immediate aftermath of the Chernobyl disaster was as chaotic as it was shocking. The explosion had sent a plume of radioactive debris into the air, spreading rapidly and contaminating everything it touched. The first responders, unaware of the full extent of the danger they faced, rushed to the scene. These brave souls, often referred to as liquidators, were tasked with the daunting mission of containing the radioactive release. Their efforts were nothing short of heroic, battling not only against an unseen enemy, but also against the clock, as every passing minute increased the risk of further damage. The Soviet government scrambled to enact measures to mitigate the disaster. A concrete sarcophagus was hastily planned to encase the damaged reactor, a colossal project aiming to isolate the radioactive materials and prevent further contamination. But the execution of this plan was fraught with challenges. Workers were exposed to dangerously high levels of radiation, and the technology to safely manage such a situation was practically non-existent. Meanwhile, the world watched in stunned silence, the gravity of the situation slowly sinking in. The immediate aftermath of the disaster was a time of fear, uncertainty, and courage. It was a time when ordinary people rose to the occasion, displaying extraordinary bravery in the face of an unprecedented crisis. However, the struggle was far from over. The task of containing the radioactive release was only the beginning. The real challenge lay in dealing with the long-term consequences of the disaster. For the residents of Chernobyl and the surrounding areas, the explosion marked the end of life as they knew it. They were now faced with the daunting task of navigating a new reality, a reality shaped by the invisible threat of radiation. But the worst was far from over. As the dust settled, the true scale of the disaster began to unfold. The Chernobyl nuclear disaster was not just an event, but a long, drawn-out saga of human suffering, environmental damage, and political repercussions. The immediate aftermath was just the tip of the iceberg. The real fight was yet to come. The invisible enemy left a visible impact on the people. In the wake of the Chernobyl disaster, the human cost was unimaginable. The men and women who worked at the plant, the firefighters who responded to the initial explosion, and the residents of nearby towns all bore the brunt of this invisible enemy: radiation. The initial explosion claimed the lives of 2 plant workers. In the following days, 28 firefighters and plant workers succumbed to acute radiation syndrome, their bodies overwhelmed by the intense exposure. But the toll did not stop there. For those who survived the initial aftermath, life was never the same. Many suffered from severe health issues due to radiation exposure. The invisible enemy had infiltrated their bodies, altering their very DNA. Cancer, particularly thyroid cancer, skyrocketed in those exposed. Birth defects became a heartbreaking reality for many families. Beyond the physical ailments, the psychological trauma was profound. Survivors lived in constant fear of the long-term effects of radiation exposure, their lives overshadowed by uncertainty and anxiety. The mental health impact of this disaster was just as significant, if not more so, than the physical. The nearby residents were not spared either. The towns surrounding the Chernobyl power plant, once bustling with life, were transformed overnight into ghost towns. The residents were forced to evacuate, leaving behind their homes, their belongings, and their lives as they knew it. In the town of Pripyat, home to many of the plant workers and their families, the evacuation was particularly heartrending. The residents were given just a few hours to pack their essentials before being evacuated. They were told it was temporary, that they would be back in a few days. But those days turned into weeks, months, and eventually years. Today, Pripyat stands as a haunting reminder of the human cost of the disaster. As the world watched in horror, a ghost town was left behind. The human cost of the Chernobyl disaster serves as a stark reminder of the potential consequences of nuclear accidents, a reminder that must not be forgotten. An eerie silence fell over the towns as they were evacuated. In the wake of the Chernobyl disaster, immediate action was necessary to protect the lives of those in the surrounding areas. The town of Pripyat, home to many of the plant's workers and their families, was evacuated a day after the explosion. The process was swift and precise, with over 49,000 residents told to pack essential items for what they were told would be a temporary relocation. Buses lined the streets, ready to whisk away the unsuspecting townsfolk from their homes, their lives, and the radioactive fallout that was silently enveloping their town. The evacuation didn't stop there. A total of 116,000 people from the surrounding areas were relocated in the subsequent weeks, as the severity of the radioactive release became apparent. The towns and villages within a 30-kilometer radius of the plant were abandoned, their streets echoing with the ghostly remnants of everyday life interrupted. This area, now known as the Chernobyl exclusion zone, became a stark testament to the disaster's enduring impact. A radioactive no-man's land where time seemed to stand still. The abandoned buildings, vacant classrooms, and empty playgrounds serve as a chilling reminder of the lives disrupted and the community shattered by the disaster. However, the exclusion zone didn't remain lifeless. Over the years, nature began to creep back in, reclaiming the deserted towns and villages. The absence of humans allowed wildlife to flourish, with rare and endangered species spotted within the zone. Animals such as wolves, boars, and even bears roam freely through the silent streets, making their homes amidst the crumbling ruins of human habitation. But the exclusion zone is not a wildlife paradise. The lingering radiation poses a continuous threat to the animals and plants inhabiting the area, and the long-term effects on the ecosystem remain a subject of ongoing research. While humans retreated, nature began to reclaim its territory. The Chernobyl exclusion zone stands as a paradoxical symbol of both desolation and resilience, a haunting reminder of the disaster's lasting impact on the land and its people. The shockwaves of the disaster were felt across the globe. It wasn't just a catastrophic event for Ukraine or the Soviet Union, it was a wake-up call for the whole world. Countries far and wide began to question their reliance on nuclear energy, sparking a global reconsideration of nuclear policies. From the United States to Japan, governments were compelled to reassess the safety measures of their own nuclear plants. The international community rallied together, providing aid and expertise to help manage the crisis. This collective response underscored the global nature of nuclear risks. The Chernobyl disaster also led to the creation of the World Association of Nuclear Operators, an organization dedicated to enhancing worldwide nuclear safety. The event was a stark reminder that with great power comes great responsibility, and that the potential consequences of nuclear energy cannot be underestimated. The world had learned a hard lesson. The daunting task of cleanup and containment loomed ahead. Following the immediate aftermath of the Chernobyl disaster, a Herculean effort was set into motion to limit the further spread of radiation and to secure the devastated reactor. A critical part of this process was the construction of a massive structure, known as the sarcophagus. This gargantuan edifice was designed to entomb the remains of Reactor 4, serving as a shield to prevent the release of further radioactive material into the environment. Thousands of workers, often referred to as liquidators, risked their lives in this monumental task, operating under extreme conditions and constant exposure to radiation. This initial sarcophagus, however, was only a temporary solution. And in the years following the disaster, a larger and more permanent structure, the new safe confinement, was erected to encase the original sarcophagus and the damaged reactor. And so the disaster's legacy was firmly sealed within. The ghost of Chernobyl continues to haunt us. 3 decades, and counting, since the Chernobyl disaster, the effects continue to linger, casting a long shadow over the world. The long-term health impacts have been severe and far-reaching. Thousands of people, both those who were directly exposed to the radiation and those born to parents who were exposed, have been afflicted with a range of health issues, from thyroid cancer to birth defects. While humans may have abandoned the Chernobyl exclusion zone, nature has claimed it back. The area, eerily devoid of human life, has become an unexpected haven for wildlife. From wolves to wild horses, from bears to bison, species not seen in the area for centuries have made a comeback. The exclusion zone has become a living laboratory for scientists studying the effects of radiation on wildlife. Contrary to expectations, it seems that the animals are thriving. Radiation, it appears, is a less immediate threat to wildlife than humans and their disruptive activities. The resurgence of wildlife in the exclusion zone presents a paradoxical picture of life flourishing amidst the ruins of a nuclear disaster. However, the ghost town of Pripyat, once home to the plant's workers and their families, stands as a stark reminder of the human cost of the disaster. The empty buildings, the abandoned amusement park, the silent streets, all echo with the lives that once filled them. The Chernobyl disaster has also had profound psychological effects. The trauma experienced by the survivors, the stress and anxiety suffered by those who were evacuated, and the ongoing fear and uncertainty about the long-term health effects all contribute to what has been termed Chernobyl syndrome. The legacy of Chernobyl is one of lingering shadows, a disaster that continues to impact lives and the environment even after all these years. Yet, amidst the devastation, there are also glimmers of resilience and renewal. The return of wildlife in the exclusion zone is a testament to nature's ability to reclaim and restore, even in the most adverse conditions. But every disaster brings lessons. Chernobyl was a grim reminder of the power we wield and the responsibility it brings. The catastrophe taught us invaluable lessons, many of which have been instrumental in shaping nuclear safety practices globally. It underscored the need for stringent safety measures and a culture of transparency in the nuclear industry. It taught us that complacency in safety protocols can lead to unprecedented disasters. The disaster also highlighted the importance of immediate and transparent communication to the global community in the event of nuclear accidents. Cover-ups and delays only exacerbate problems and hinder collective response strategies. Moreover, Chernobyl reminded us of the long-term environmental and health impacts of nuclear accidents. It underscored the importance of disaster preparedness, not just in terms of immediate response, but also in addressing the long-term consequences. The lessons learned from Chernobyl continue to shape nuclear safety and disaster response strategies, reinforcing the need for caution, transparency, and preparedness. And thus we remember Chernobyl not just as a disaster, but as a lesson for humanity. Chernobyl, a name that will forever resonate with the dangers of nuclear power. A tragic tale of a flourishing city turned ghost town, a testament to the worst nuclear accident in history. The disaster of 1986 wasn't just an event, but a stark reminder of the potential devastation that nuclear power can unleash when things go awry. A cascade of errors and violations led to an explosion that sent radioactive fallout across Europe, leaving an indelible scar on the landscape and the lives of those involved. The immediate and long-term impacts were profound, with health issues, ecological changes, and shifts in global nuclear policies. The efforts to contain, evacuate, and clean up the disaster zone were monumental, highlighting the courage and resilience of those who face the catastrophe head-on. Today, the Chernobyl exclusion zone stands as a silent witness to this human tragedy. As we remember Chernobyl, let us not forget the lessons it taught us.